Hello everyone and welcome to our next history lesson. Today we're going to be taking a look at ancient Egyptian religion, and this is going to be a two-part lesson, so we'll have a look at a bit more of it in detail next week. And we know that religion in ancient Egypt was a very important thing. We know that because in the last lesson on society we saw that priests were ranked pretty highly in ancient Egyptian societal structures. They were seen as important and significant people. We also know from previous lessons, one of the first lessons that we looked at in ancient Egypt, that they had something called a creation story, and that was the Egyptians trying to make sense of the world around them and explaining how the world began. And we know that that included lots of kind of fantastical kind of gods and goddesses and people and actions and things. So that gives us a bit of an insight into how religion played into Egyptian society and culture and the way that it was treated. Now today we're going to be exploring some of the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, but we have to note that religion in Egypt changed. Okay, it started as one thing and then it changed into another. So have a little think. Has that happened in any of the other topics that you've covered? So when you looked at things like the Stone Age, did the Celts change their religion? When we looked at the Romans, did their religion change in any way? What was their religion like at first, and then how did it change? If you've looked at other periods of history, did similar things happen there? Okay, so first of all we're going to start off in this temple. So straight away as we look around the temple we can see that this is obviously a very significant building, that we can see that there are great statues in here, that there are lots of structures in here, that there's a lot of detail being put into the actual temples themselves, which just goes to show that religion was an important thing in ancient Egypt. Okay, so it's important to know though that not all temples would have looked like this. Some of them might have been bigger, some of them might have been smaller, some of them might have been less significant. Okay, it just depended on the place and the materials available and which god they were kind of following, and that's a bit of a clue as to ancient Egypt and their gods. So let's have a look at some of the gods and goddesses themselves. Now interestingly, we've said gods and goddesses, which gives you a bit of an insight into what kinds of people they were. So we're going to start with Ra, because he was one of the most significant gods in all of ancient Egypt. So now if we take a look at Ra, we can see that this is a bit odd, that he's kind of like, is he a man, is he a hawk, is he a bit of a hybrid? Well, we can see actually he's a bit of a hybrid between the two, between an animal and a human. Now have a think, other religions that you've seen or that you've learnt about, did they include animals in them? What kind of role did animals play in their religion? So let's take a look at the information. So we know that Ra was a male and that he had parents, that he was the sun god. So that's interesting, god of the sun. We've come across this quite often in other types of religions, that there was some sort of god of the sun. Now it says that in human form he was depicted with the head of a falcon, a ram or a scarab, and he's often wearing a sun disk above his head. And he was one of the most important gods, and he was regarded as the father of the pharaohs. So we can see that there is some sort of link there between religion and the pharaohs there. So interesting to see that there's this kind of mix of animals and humans, and they've got these kind of mythical qualities about them. This tells us a lot about the ancient Egyptians and what they believed and how important it was to them. Let's take a look at somebody else. Let's take a look at Sobek. Now Sobek's an interesting character because of his role within ancient Egypt compared to other places. So Sobek was a male, his parents were Neth and Seth, and he was the god of the Nile who brought fertility to the land. He was the patron of warriors, and he was also associated with pharaonic power. Now he was depicted as a crocodile in human form with the head of a crocodile. Crocodiles, they were considered the symbol of Sobek. They were mummified and buried in honour of the god himself. Now that's really interesting because crocodiles then obviously played a role in Egypt because they were in the Nile, and given that he was the god of the Nile, that would make sense. Now have a think. The Romans, did they have a god of the Nile? And if they didn't, why do you think they didn't have a god of the Nile? Was the Nile all that important to them in where they were in Italy and Rome? Have a little think. I've been thinking as well, how is this similar to some of the other gods that I've seen in with the Romans, places, people like the Greeks, the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, if you've come across them. But it wasn't just men. Okay, let's take a look at Hathor, and we can clearly see from the image that this is going to be a woman, this is going to be a female. And it also says that her parents were Ra. So this tells us that there's a relationship between the different gods as well. It says that she was the goddess of beauty, love, joy, fertility, music and dance. In human form, she's seen as a cow with a sun disk between her horns. It's mentioned as a mother, daughter or wife of Ra in different myths. And her Greek counterpart is Aphrodite. So that shows us that there were some links there possibly between the Egyptians and the Greeks, that they had similar gods, just with different names and different things that they were possibly doing. And let's take one last quick look here at Sekhmet, because Sekhmet's an interesting character. Okay, so Sekhmet is another female. She's the goddess of war and plagues, but also of healing, and she was the patron of doctors, which meant that she represented doctors. Now, that's a bit weird, because she was the goddess of war and plagues, but also the goddess of healing. So she was in charge of a few different things, and things that kind of went against each other. How can you be the goddess of war and of healing? What does that mean? It was seen that she was in human form with the head of a lioness, wearing a sun disk and the serpent Uraeus on her head. She was believed that ancient Egyptian doctors considered themselves the priests of Sekhmet. So it's seen that doctors in ancient Egypt, which tells us a bit about their culture again, they would do the work of Sekhmet. So that's really quite an interesting little piece of information there in how religion was viewed within daily life and what people would do in their daily lives to please the gods as well. So now if we have a look at all of the gods now coming out, and we've got to bear in mind that this isn't literally all of the gods of ancient Egypt. There were lots of them, lots and lots and lots of them, but these are some of the more significant. As we go through, we can see that lots of them had these kind of hybrid qualities of being human form, animal form, and having sort of the qualities of animals as well. Amun here, he's a bit of an odd one in that he's kind of painted blue. When we take a look, it says that he's actually the deity, which means God, the god of the air, the wind and creation. He's usually depicted as a human with two plumes on his head or in the form of a ram. So there being the god of the air and the wind and creation, and we know that a lot of the Egyptian creation myths involved the Nile and water. That might bring some suggestion and some clues as to why he's depicted as being blue. If we take a look at their family tree, that tells us as well that the Egyptian gods, a lot of them were related in some sort of way, that they believed that they had mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and lots of other religions at the same time felt this as well, that the gods were kind of one big family, or they had kind of familial elements to them as well. So that gives us a bit of an insight into them. So what we would like you to do is we would like you to think about what you've just learned about Egyptian gods and goddesses and religion. And we want you to compare that with Roman religion. Now I'm going to include a link in the description so that you can brush up on your Roman religion, okay? But we want you to compare what was similar and what was different. So you might want to think about the types of gods that there were. Did the Romans have one type of god? Did the Egyptians have the same type of god? Was it exactly the same god? Were they in charge of the same things but they had different names and they looked differently? Did they have different responsibilities? How did they impact the daily lives of those people? So we know that the Romans would pray to their gods to help them in certain ways. Do you think that the Egyptians prayed to their gods to help them in certain ways? What were they like in terms of one god or many gods? Did they both have just one god? Many gods? How did religion change for them? We know with the Romans that they started off with lots and lots of different gods, and then they became Christian. Well, funny enough, the Egyptians did exactly the same thing. They started off with lots and lots of gods, and the Egyptians were one of the first societies to really become Christian as well. And lots of stories from the Bible are based in Egypt. So why do you think that happened? Why do you think both Rome and Egypt became Christian? And what does that tell us about those people? So we'd like you to make at least 5 comparisons. Give us a few things that are the same, a few things that are different. Don't forget to brush up on your Roman religion and follow the link in the description. And don't forget to send it to your teachers as well, because we love seeing what you're up to. So take care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you for the next video.